Well, hey folks, it's your old pal King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. I had hoped today to do a video talking about my new Total Party System Fairy Tale Handbook. However, Amazon, or more specifically UPS, decided not to deliver it on Friday, citing the weather as being why it was delayed, despite the fact that up until 5 p.m. that day it said it was out for delivery. So, I mean, as you can see, the weather is pretty bad lately, some light rain, a little overcast skies now and then. I can see why that wasn't delivered. So instead, I guess, at the risk of overly running the one game too much into the ground with everybody, I guess we're going to talk a little bit about Girls Gone Vampire Gilded. So in the setting of Girls Gone Vampire, most of the supernatural creatures of the world in the mid-20th century are concentrated in either North America or East Asia. The overall setting of the Total Party System timeline is that in ancient times, most of the, kingdoms of the classical and Bronze Age world were openly ruled by supernatural creatures that all these thousands of years later we've convinced ourselves, are just a bunch of myths and legends and exaggerations. And over the last 1,000+ years, it was the rise of Christianity and Islam that have driven most of the supernatural creatures out of North Africa, Europe, and Central Asia. Girls Gone Vampire Gilded describes the last 3 supernatural domains that can be found in this part of the planet, specifically the cities of Casablanca, Amsterdam, and Damascus. Now, here and there, small cities all around everywhere, you might find a vampire or two, but a proper supernatural domain is when you have a diverse crowd of different species of vampires and other supernaturals all having to learn how to cohabitate with each other and still be able to get away with feeding off the human population that hosts them. There are no overarching supernatural civilizational forces like the Camarilla or the Sabbat in Girls Gone Vampire. Each domain is unique and has its own specific mix of supernaturals and vampires. Even amongst the vampires found in North America, Noir York City and Noir Angeles and Noir Orleans are not at all identical in their overall makeup and rulership. Now, the Casablanca setting in 1955, the country of Morocco is currently in the middle of a civil war as the native population is trying to force out the French occupying colonial power. All this chaos has given the vampires and supernaturals of the city of Casablanca a little bit more freedom in operating, but they can easily be dragged down by all the politics and fighting that's going on in their country. Some vampire species, like your utopians and arch-vampires and vampire urges, can pop up anywhere because the nature of how they become vampires is somewhat random and based upon the individual. Most other vampire species use discretion and magic ritual to create more of their kind, though. And the vampires in Casablanca are generally similar. In Casablanca, we have the line of Scipio, which is one of the last remnants of the Roman werewolves that have been hiding amongst the Berbers of the area ever since the Vandals sacked the city of Anfa, which is the original Roman colony that Casablanca is built upon. There's the Assassin's Guild, which is the front for the original Delphic order of psychic vampires. There's a false front organization called Voodoo International that is not a genuine voodoo organization, but is just kind of used as a cover for Spanish and Portuguese Zibalban vampires that migrated over to Africa during the period of the triangle slave trade over the Atlantic. There are the Fangs of Allah, an offshoot of the Zibalban vampires that were brought to Morocco by the Spaniards, who have moved into the local Bedouin population and are now siding with the rebels against the French. The Knights of the Order of the Anti-Pope is a cult that's devoted towards a group of French sin-eater vampires. The League of Antiquarians is an archaeological and mystical artifact hunting organization. I describe numerous brand new magical items in this book that cannot be found in North America. And then there are the Witch Hunters of the Sahel, who are vampire and supernatural hunters who operate in the band of Africa stretching from the west coast to the east coast, sandwiched in between the Sahara Desert and the jungles of the African interior. Now, Amsterdam is a bit different in tone, obviously. Amsterdam is in the Netherlands. It's a younger city than either Casablanca or Damascus. There's less political strife, obviously, going on right now, but in 1955, it's just barely a decade after the ending of Germany's occupation of the Netherlands, and while Amsterdam is struggling to move on with life, it still bears a lot of heavy psychic scars from those events. Some of the things you can find in Amsterdam include the old cult of the Moon Goddess, which predates the North American version of the Cult of the Moon Goddess, which is the organization run by the Dryad vampires that also use Puka vampires and Warg vampires to carry out their ends of their little wilderness kingdoms and domains. There's the Utopian Pilgrimage, a group of utopian vampires who've assembled in Amsterdam as an alternate rallying point to New York City. The Redeemers are a bunch of vampires who have convinced themselves that they have been forgiven for their sins and are human again. This isn't true. They are still just as much affected by the sunlight, and they still need to feed on blood and all the other normal vampire stuff. But they're crazy, and just conveniently just happen to never go outside when the sun's out, kind of a thing. There's the East Fiji Company, which secretly employs a bunch of aquatic vampires. Aquatic vampires are mermaids who are able to attain a perfectly looking human form by feeding regularly on human blood. They do not gain the healing powers or the immortality of normal vampires. It simply just gives them the ability to leave the water and walk around amongst humankind and look normal. The rat-like plague vampires, who have a Phantom of the Opera vibe. Their cult is called the Masks of the Black Death. There's the New Sound, a rock and roll cult run by succubi as kind of an alternate to the incubi infestation of the jazz music scene in New York City. And then in Amsterdam, there is an ongoing conflict between Jewish-made golems and Nazi-made gargoyles who are still battling out World War II based upon their just basic programming of the spells that were used to animate them. Now, Damascus is in Syria. It is one of the oldest cities on the entire planet and also like the longest occupied capital city in existence. In 1955, Damascus is enjoying a brief little golden era before, well, the things that happened to Syria and the time since then happened to Syria. It's the last days of the good times, so to say. In Damascus, you can find the blood of the Anunnaki. These are a last remnant of people descended from Olympian demigods, from the Babylonian pantheon. They're no longer immortal, they're no longer automatically super psychic, but to try to maintain their glory, by feeding upon the blood of one of the last surviving Olympians that they keep in stasis, they can re-engage some of their old abilities that their ancestors possessed. The Clerics of Iblis are a group of vampire sin-eaters who have failed for centuries to infiltrate Islam, and so they've basically given up and have just gone full-on Hail Satan. The Damascus Underground is a criminal organization that is run secretly by the last known colony of Minotaurs to be found on Earth, living underground deep below the city, and have been there for thousands of years. The Golden Horde is a group of Russian vampires that originally arrived in the area with the Mongol invasions many centuries ago, and have recently begun to have contact with their Russian counterparts again in recent decades. The Vigil of the Hajj are a group of vampire urges who have sworn themselves to uphold the faith and keep a vigil on pilgrims who are heading to Mecca to ensure their safety and to take care of the stragglers. Vampire Zephyrs are disembodied vampires that must leap from host body to host body on a much more regular pace than other types of vampires, and they are often referred to locally as the wind that walks. And then there's the Society of Ishtar, an older edition of the Hantubelian werecat cult that has been in control of Damascus for the last 1,000 years. So that's what you can find in Girls Gone Vampire Gilded. You can pick up a copy following links in the description box below if you want it in PDF or print. There's going to be a second follow-up book that goes with this called Girls Gone Vampire Jaded sometime later this year, which will discuss the eastern half of the Eurasian continent. And I'm also considering doing a Girls Gone Vampire Down Under for the Thousand Islands and Oceania zone of the world. And we'll see what happens from there. I guess that's about it. Until next time.
Learn
And oh, while I still have you here, if you're looking for more of a tongue-in-cheek version of the Star Trek stereotype, might I suggest We Want Soviet Men, where you can play as comrades on your comrade starship exploring the stars. It's a source book for Escape from Planet Matriarchy, the very first original Total Party System rulebook, where players take on the roles of 20th century astronauts who are shot 500 years into the future to crash land on the moon of Titan to discover the nightmare society that has evolved there. Both of which can be found in the Vintage Future RPG, available now on Amazon.com in print or drive through RPG for a PDF.